brown-haired girl lies injured on a dirty floor, thinking with frustration that if she had known this would happen, she would have fought back. In a dark memory, she recalls being bullied for the first time by three silhouetted girls, their smiling leader with pink hair taunting her as Kawashima. Another bully with light brown hair mockingly holds a lighter to a drawing of a boy, calling it hilarious, as the girl's narration laments not stopping them with everything she had. Her hand reaches out in desperation, begging the bully not to burn the drawing, a flicker of hope that it might not be too late crossing her mind. But the bully lets the flaming drawing drop, feigning an accident and cruelly laughing at the girl's tears, calling her a loser for crying over a fictional character. Crying out, "No!" The bullied girl reaches for the burning embers, devastated that she couldn't protect the one thing that gave her strength. Her lifeless hand rests in a pool of blood beside the charred remains of the drawing. A sudden, jarring transition marks a shift in reality. A woman with vibrant red hair and green eyes awakens in bed, looking dazed and unwell. A cheerful blonde maid and an older man with white hair rush to her side, expressing immense relief that Lydia has woken up, calling it a miracle. The blonde maid holds her hand as Lydia, now with a bandage on her forehead, wonders why the name sounds familiar while seeing her new, unfamiliar face in a mirror. Staring at her reflection, she's shocked to see a stranger and questions what's happening, as she distinctly remembers dying in the school bathroom. The red-haired woman explains that her memories are fuzzy, and the white-haired man reassures her it's normal after such a high fall, adding that people from the Dalton house are on their way. The blonde maid tells Lydia to rest, suggesting this is a blessing as she can now stop being Prince Orlando's handmaid, leaving Lydia to wonder about the name Orlando. In a memory, her past self is seen reading a book that describes a noble girl, Lydia Dalton, who became Prince Orlando's personal handmaid. The red-haired woman puts the pieces together, realizing with a start that she has been reborn as Lydia. She remembers an ornate illustration from her favorite novel, which featured the handmaid of Prince Orlando. She recalls the novel's plot, a romance between a crown prince and a princess, and how the second prince, Orlando, protected the side character, Colette. The novel described Orlando as the secret son of Emperor Claude I and a descendant of the legendary Thunder Dragon. From birth, Orlando was destined to awaken the dragon's power and become the Emperor's sword. But as a child, he showed no powers and was deemed a disgrace by the disappointed emperor, who locked him away in a tower. The novel, she remembers, only briefly mentioned his tragic past in that tower. A flashback shows young Orlando, bound and crying, having grown up without affection and full of anxiety. Once his powers awakened, he was relentlessly used as a weapon in countless battles for the emperor. He dedicated his life to protecting Colette, his first love, to the very end. Ultimately, he died a brutal death in her place, slain by her enemies with a sword through his chest. She remembers her past self, for whom the neglected and tragic Orlando was an ultimate favorite character. Now as Lydia, she is ecstatic, realizing with a blush that she has truly been reborn into his world. Ignoring the maid's protests, Lydia declares that she's fine and must see Prince Orlando immediately. She smiles, her eyes filled with newfound determination. With purpose, she runs down a grand empty hallway, her red hair flowing behind her. She believes Orlando himself is the reason for her second chance, recalling that the drawing of him felt different just before she died. A memory surfaces of the drawing glowing with a brilliant, magical light. She stops, realizing he saved her, and now she is resolved to change his tragic fate, refusing to let him be a mere stepping stone for the heroine. Remembering the novel's heroine, Colette, Lydia recalls that Orlando remains locked away until his powers awaken. She knows that Colette is the first to show him kindness, which leads to his tragic love and sacrifice, so she resolves to change their first meeting. Peeking around a corner, she finally finds him, a small, startled boy with dark, messy hair. Overjoyed that she's arrived so early in the story while he's still an adorable child, her thoughts are interrupted when the boy apologizes to Lydia, thinking he tripped her. She asks if he tripped her, but internally doubts it, feeling that something else must have happened. Confused by his fearful reaction, she asks him not to be scared and wonders if the original Lydia used to hit him. Her heart aches with the realization that as a cast-out royal child, no one would have cared about his mistreatment. The young boy begs her not to be mad or ignore him, as she's the only one who talks to him, which brings tears to Lydia's eyes as she swears to the gods. She gently promises him that she will never hurt or ignore him again, determined to live without regrets. Kneeling, she pulls the boy into a heartfelt hug, ready to defy the author's intent and become a villain if it means changing his story. Holding him close, she makes a vow not only to Orlando but to herself, resolving to never give up on saving him. She plans to slowly change his cruel reality before the main story begins, but then she notices the boy is shaking in her arms. Lydia asks if he's cold, but he says no, making her wonder just how cruel the original Lydia must have been to make him tremble like this. In a moment of cute panic, she worries her hug was too forceful, but the young prince clarifies that isn't the reason. The boy, on the verge of tears, explains he's flustered by her sudden kindness and afraid that something bad might happen as a result. Lydia stares with wide, understanding eyes, realizing he's so used to cruelty that he fears her kindness is a prelude to something worse. Remembering the past, Lydia realizes with a jolt of horror exactly what the original Lydia had done to the young prince. In a flashback, the former Lydia cruelly taunts young Orlando, inviting him to play a special game of hide-and-seek after having hit and teased him often. The memory reveals her twisted game, giving Orlando hope by playing with him, only to terrify him by pretending a monster was coming, laughing at his screams. She recalls that the original Lydia, while leaning out a window to scare him, lost her balance and fell to her death, never expecting her cruelty to backfire so fatally. The flashback ends on young Orlando's face, utterly traumatized by what he just witnessed. Back in the present, Lydia understands his deep-seated fear, as he timidly asks if she's okay and if her fall will be fatal. Gazing at him with newfound sympathy, Lydia quietly acknowledges his painful memories. She gently takes his small hands in hers, offering silent reassurance. Looking down at the floor, Orlando apologizes, blaming himself for her fall because he agreed to play her cruel game. Lydia insists it was her fault for not seeing the rotten window frame, but a crying Orlando reveals she only became his maid after failing to be assigned to his older brother. Calling himself a monster, Orlando says she was forced to stay with him, making Lydia realize the original Lydia's resentment was the root of her cruelty. She remembers a detail from the novel. The original Lydia's father, Count Dalton, had arranged a suitable marriage for her with another noble family. When she failed and was assigned to the forgotten Prince Orlando instead, she took out all her frustrations on the innocent child. Holding his hands tighter, Lydia firmly tells him that she no longer thinks that way at all. She asks for another chance, promising to become someone he can rely on, which moves Orlando to tears as he questions if a monster like him is worthy of her devotion. Lydia passionately refutes his self-loathing, declaring his features are proof of his divine dragon heritage, and that he's destined to awaken his powers and be praised, which makes Orlando wonder if it's truly possible. With an enthusiastic yes, she promises to take excellent care of him to help his awakening come sooner. She explains that as a half-human, he just needs to grow strong, though she worries about him awakening too early, remembering the novel described him as constantly neglected, cold, and hungry. A vision of an older Orlando sitting under the shadow of a dragon illustrates how his malnourishment in the original story delayed his powers until adulthood. Determined to change his fate, Lydia beams and vows to provide for his every need so he can focus entirely on growing strong and awakening his dragon powers. A loud rumble from Orlando's stomach interrupts the moment, and he blushes, asking if she heard it, while Lydia looks on in cute surprise. He apologizes for his hungry stomach, but she smiles kindly, admitting she's hungry too and will eat with him. As she stands to leave, Orlando shyly tugs on her dress, having one more request. He asks if she will promise to stay as nice as she has been today, and Lydia vows she will never change until the day he no longer needs her. Lydia finds the head maid in the dining hall, who dismissively offers only leftovers for the prince, but Lydia confesses that it's her fault he hasn't eaten. The head maid is taken aback when Lydia ignores the leftovers and firmly demands premium steak for the prince instead. The head maid reminds Lydia that she herself forbade giving the monster meat, but Lydia dismisses her past self as stupid and asserts her duty to the prince. Unmoved, the headmaid declares the premium steak is reserved exclusively for the emperor and the crown prince. When her pleas are flatly rejected, a frustrated Lydia realizes she must resort to more drastic measures. Orlando's eyes sparkle at the sight of a delicious steak dinner, a sight Lydia finds both adorable and unsettling as she urges him to eat. She watches him with a warm, gentle smile, content to see him happy. When Orlando hesitates, Lydia intuits his fear of being poisoned and, remembering the original's cruelty, offers to taste test the food for him. The young prince looks up, startled by her sudden, considerate offer. He clarifies that wasn't his intention, but Lydia reassures him that it's wise for him to be suspicious of everyone, including her. Encouraging his vigilance, she tells him to watch her actions to see if she's trustworthy. But Orlando asks for the knife, stating that testing for poison is a maid's duty. Lydia allows him to check the food, vowing to protect him, and after a careful taste, he confirms it's safe and thanks her. He digs in with relish, making Lydia swoon over his cuteness, and she asks him how the steak is. In a flashback, the headmaid scoffs at Lydia's threats, declaring they won't work on her. As the headmaid orders her out, Lydia swiftly trips her, sending the woman sprawling with a cry of surprise. Standing over the fallen maid, Lydia coolly declares that if Prince Orlando can't have the steak, no one can, prompting the maid to threaten a whipping. Lydia calls her bluff, pointing out the headmaid would also be punished for failing to control her and reminding her that her position is highly coveted. Back in the present, Lydia smugly recounts to a wide-eyed Orlando how she easily snatched the steak for him. While cutting his steak, Lydia teaches him that he must have the courage to rebel against a world where the strong oppress the weak. She wisely adds that this lesson applies to her as well, advising him not to trust her completely. Later, Lydia puts on a flawless act, apologizing to the headmaid for accidentally stepping on the steak and offering the support of House Dalton as compensation. Continuing her lesson, Lydia encourages Orlando to get used to commanding others, as he is destined to become a worthy successor to the throne. She laughingly stops herself from rambling on, telling him to enjoy his meal as watching him reminds her of her own childhood. As Orlando eats, she reflects on her past life with ordinary parents who only had more children in their quest for a son. A somber memory reveals she was the forgotten middle child, neither the first daughter nor the desired son, and grew up feeling unloved. In a flashback, Lydia recalls her meager childhood meals and her parents' conflicting advice, dreaming of the day she could eat her fill of meat. She remembers telling her parents she was being bullied, only for them to scold her and question why she was always the victim. The bullying from her pink-haired classmate Kawashima only worsened, as she cruelly suggested Lydia should just die, making her feel utterly hopeless. She contrasts her past self with the original Lydia, who had a defiant and proud nature, refusing to take orders from anyone. Realizing the original Lydia's strained family relationship stemmed from selfishness, the new Lydia sees a parallel between her own past loneliness and Orlando's. Looking at Orlando with gentle determination, she vows to raise him like a younger brother, building a bond of trust as a true family. Their quiet moment is shattered by the announcement of the Crown Prince's arrival, leaving Lydia stunned and confused by this unexpected deviation from the novel. Resolving to face the situation, Lydia decides to prepare for the audience and gently takes a worried Orlando's hand, telling him to follow her. As she leads him through the tower, she recalls how Orlando is confined to the top floor, with the key to his room hanging just out of reach on the outer wall. They approach a large, locked iron gate, the key a symbol of Orlando's imprisonment. Standing before the gate with Orlando, Lydia realizes she's trapped with him and has no choice but to welcome the Crown Prince. A promotional banner for the series appears. Orlando shuffles his feet nervously as he and Lydia await the prince's arrival. Lydia squeezes his hand reassuringly, telling him to simply greet the prince the way she taught him. She promises to protect him no matter what, and with a small nod, Orlando quietly agrees. A handsome, blonde-haired young man arrives, and Lydia leads Orlando in a formal greeting to the Crown Prince. The Crown Prince looks down at them from behind the gate, remarking with a thoughtful expression that they look rather strange. Orlando flinches behind the bars as a sudden, grim memory flashes through Lydia's mind. As the Crown Prince observes them, Lydia realizes with dread that if events unfold as they did in the novel, this meeting will not end well. The Crown Prince, speaking with his attendants, explains he came because he heard his brother looked different, while one attendant notes Orlando's unusual personality and suggests a game. An attendant with brown hair steps forward and proposes a Great Bear Adventure game to Orlando, which Lydia recognizes as the exact ominous event from the original story. A flashback reveals the Crown Prince, Austen, had come to the tower out of curiosity and was so shocked by Orlando's appearance that he made an insensitive comment. The guards, assuming Austen hated his brother, began mocking Orlando to curry favor with the Crown Prince. However, Austen was disgusted by the guards' cruelty and fiercely scolded them for their behavior. Orlando was moved by this first act of defense, and in the present, an attendant offers to show him the outside world in exchange for something. Lydia looks on grimly, suspecting the guards' mockery must have been truly awful to warrant such a strong reaction from Austen. The attendant cruelly asks Orlando to give him one of the scales from his face, leaving the young boy speechless with fear. While Lydia seethes with anger, the attendant taunts Orlando, questioning his hesitation since the scales will just grow back. Lydia is horrified, realizing the attendant is cruelly exploiting Orlando's desperate wish to see the outside world. The Crown Prince, Austen, angrily cuts in, shouting that it's enough and calling the attendant's actions pure cruelty. Unfazed, the smiling attendant thinks to himself that the prince is too soft and won't truly refuse or punish him for his actions. Lydia grows frustrated, thinking that Austen's gentle reprimand is not nearly enough to stop the abuse. As Austen again orders the attendant to stand down, Lydia mutters that he's being far too kind. The attendant gives a perfunctory apology to the prince, but Lydia steps forward, deciding to take matters into her own hands. The attendant blocks her path, drawing his sword slightly as he mockingly asks if a maid has something to say to the prince. In one swift, surprising move, Lydia disarms the attendant, taking his sword from its scabbard. The sudden act leaves Orlando, the attendant, and Prince Austen completely stunned. The attendant stares nervously at his own sword, now held firmly in Lydia's hand. With a deathly glare, Lydia issues an ultimatum. Apologize to Prince Orlando now, or she will kill him. The shocked attendant, Nero, accuses Lydia of joking, arguing that he's already been warned by the prince and she has no right to interfere. Her eyes flashing with resolve, Lydia repeats her threat to kill him if he doesn't apologize immediately. As the attendant flinches, Orlando begs Lydia to stop, afraid of the consequences of her actions in front of his brother. Another attendant reassures Nero that she's only bluffing, while Nero smirks, confident a mere servant wouldn't dare kill him in front of the Crown Prince. After Nero calls her bluff, Lydia presses the sword into his hand, forcing a cry of pain and a hasty, panicked apology. Smiling victoriously, Lydia coolly commands him to kneel and apologize properly. As the attendant kneels and apologizes, Orlando watches, realizing that unlike his past self, he can't simply forgive this insult. He knows Lydia risked her life to secure this apology, and he refuses to let her sacrifice be meaningless. Finding his voice, Orlando sternly warns the groveling attendant that there will not be a next time. Lydia watches proudly, believing that this lesson in power is exactly what Orlando needs, and that he has the potential to surpass the Crown Prince. A promotional banner for the series is shown. As a flustered Orlando looks on, Lydia turns away with a satisfied smirk. Lydia formally introduces herself to Prince Austen, but the injured attendant, Nero, demands the prince punish her for her insolence. To the shock of his attendants, Prince Austen declares that Lydia acted with courage to defend her master and deserves a reward, not punishment. Austen asks Lydia to name her reward, promising to grant any reasonable request, and she confidently replies that she has just one. A wave of anxiety washes over Orlando as he realizes this is the perfect opportunity for Lydia to leave him and serve his esteemed brother instead. His heart sinks at the thought of losing her, especially now that they've only just begun to grow close. While Orlando braces for her departure, Lydia surprises everyone by pointing at the attendants and requesting a thorough investigation into their theft of the tower's ornaments. As Austen reels from the accusation, Lydia recalls from the novel that the guards had been replacing valuables with fakes to sell for profit. The two attendants frantically deny the charges, claiming Lydia is lying, but Austin glares at them with cold suspicion. Lydia gratefully thanks the prince, privately hoping that by exposing them, she can replace the corrupt guards and prevent the future bullying of Orlando. Prince Austin simply tells her that thanks are not necessary. Having made his decision, Austin turns and departs, leaving Lydia and Orlando behind the locked gate. As he walks away, the Crown Prince reflects on the maid who dared to challenge him, thinking to himself that Lydia Dalton is indeed an interesting person. Later, Orlando finally eats his steak, and though it's now cold, Lydia feels it was all worth it just to see him enjoy his meal. Taking his empty plate, Lydia asks Orlando if he slept well, prompting him to ask why she's concerned. She explains she was worried after the previous day's stressful events and gently suggests he take a nap. Orlando stops her, sincerely thanking her for her help before making another, more personal request. Blushing, he shyly asks if she will sleep with him, a request that stuns Lydia as she recalls how the original never cared for his well-being. Internally, Lydia celebrates this as a major step in gaining his trust, but her silence makes Orlando assume she is unwilling. A single tear falls from Orlando's eye as he concludes that no one would want to look at his ugly face for so long. He quickly retracts his request, apologizing for saying something strange, while Lydia looks on with a pensive expression. Lydia kindly reassures the young prince that his request isn't strange at all. Yes, she says, gently booping his nose, so please believe me. Lydia's warm, genuine smile seems to put him at ease. Now feeling sleepy, Orlando asks Lydia if they can take a nap, and she readily agrees. As they walk hand in hand toward his room, Lydia asks if he enjoys any fairy tales. When Orlando admits he's never heard any, Lydia offers to tell him one she created herself, and his eyes light up with curiosity. Sitting by his bedside, Lydia tells him to close his eyes and listen, while Orlando thinks she seems like a completely different person, wondering if he is dreaming. As Orlando drifts off to sleep, Lydia begins a story about the Castina Empire, all the while reflecting on the novel's plot where he awakens his dragon powers. She recalls how, in the original story, Orlando's lack of education made him a target for manipulation and bullying when he finally entered high society. The lessons arranged by the Emperor were merely for show, leaving the adult Orlando unprepared and isolated. She remembers that the ministers, consumed by their own power struggles, never bothered to ensure the prince was properly educated. A flashback reveals the Emperor's cold reasoning. An ignorant puppet is far easier to control. Returning to her story, Lydia speaks of wise emperors who built the nation's strength, even as she knows they all looked down on Orlando, and of a great war sparked by rival kingdoms. She recounts the tale of Orlando's great-grandfather, who led the Empire's army to a decisive victory after a long and arduous war. When she mentions that the great general, Gerald Eaton, was made a duke for his service, Orlando recognizes the name as belonging to his brother's maternal family. Lydia smiles, pleased that he is following the story so intently. Orlando remarks on his brother's perfect lineage, but notes that this very fact makes the Emperor despise and watch him closely. He looks at Lydia with confusion, asking why the Emperor would feel that way. Lydia gently tells him that origins don't determine one's life, and that it's okay not to understand everything right away. Looking into his eyes, she assures him that with hard work, he can stand shoulder to shoulder with the Crown Prince. Orlando is deeply moved, realizing it's the first time anyone has ever offered him such comfort and hope, as the scene shifts to a new day with a luxurious feast. Now dressed in a maid's uniform, Orlando looks bewildered at the massive meal, and Lydia, also in uniform, explains her parents are returning early due to her accident. As Orlando's expression falls, Lydia explains that the feast is meant to last the whole day while she runs an errand, apologizing for leaving him with other maids. Orlando reassures her that he doesn't mind cold food, and Lydia promises to return by the next morning. His eyes widen with hope as he asks if she truly means it. Lydia smiles warmly and suggests they seal the deal with a pinky promise. With a shy and hesitant expression, Orlando links his small pinky finger with hers. From behind a doorway, Orlando peeks out at Lydia, who smiles knowingly. Lydia waves goodbye, promising to return soon, while a saddened Orlando watches her leave, vowing to wait for her. As two new male attendants watch Lydia go, one notes that not only are the new guards stricter, but the crown prince also seems fond of her. Before departing, Lydia instructs the two attendants to ensure Prince Orlando's safety until she returns the next morning. One of the new attendants smiles and reassures Lydia not to worry, stating that protecting the prince is their duty. The moment Lydia is gone, the attendants' expressions turn sinister as they mock her, deciding to go torment the monster prince to blow off some steam. Finding Orlando, the attendants mockingly ask if the food was made by that woman, while Orlando thinks about how delicious it must be. Orlando, with dirt on his face, defiantly asks the attendants why they've entered a place they aren't allowed to be. One of the attendants sneers cruelly, telling Orlando not to act like a prince when he's just locked up for being ugly. Towering over the small boy, the attendants stare down at Orlando, who defensively asks what they're planning to do. As an attendant reaches for the dessert, Orlando cries out, desperately telling him not to touch the food Lydia made for him. The other attendant roughly grabs Orlando's head, ordering him to be still as the young prince struggles against his grip. Taking a plate, the first attendant smirks, declaring the food a waste on Orlando and claiming it as their reward, while the prince weakly begs him to stop. After tasting the food and noting its quality, the attendant watches as Orlando begins to cry, pleading for them to stop. Tisk! Annoyed by the tears, the attendant loses his appetite and spitefully pours the rest of the food over Orlando's head for the rats to eat. Orlando furiously struggles, vowing never to forgive them for wasting Lydia's meal, while the attendant holding him threatens his life and his partner recalls a rumor that the prince never gets angry. The attendant taunts Orlando, asking if Lydia is important enough for him to defy them. With downcast eyes, Orlando quietly affirms that Lydia is important to him. Elsewhere, Lydia sits alone, revealing that her visit home serves a dual purpose, as she has another important matter to attend to. She recalls Orlando's fascination with a book about the outside world and thinks of her family, her father, Count Dalton, and her librarian brother, Julius Dalton. Lydia reflects on her strained family relationships in both her past and present lives, due to her original arrogant personality. Unsure how to act, she wonders how normal people express affection and imagines herself acting cute and bubbly. As a maid announces their arrival, Lydia resolves to greet her family first and gauge their reaction before deciding her next move. Bracing for a cold reception, she's surprised when a woman with reddish-brown hair calls her name with warmth. The woman, whom Lydia realizes is her mother, holds her hands and expresses genuine concern over her injuries. Lydia smiles reassuringly, telling her mother she is fine and plans to return to the prince's side the next morning. Her mother expresses relief, but gently chides her for being reckless, while a man with glasses watches from behind. Moved by their genuine care, Lydia is touched and apologizes for making her parents worry. Her mother and the man with glasses look down at her with expressions of deep concern. With a determined look, Lydia looks up at her parents, ready to speak from the heart. She steps forward and embraces her mother in a warm hug. Held by both her parents, Lydia confesses the incident made her realize how selfish she'd been, moving her mother to tears. Walking arm in arm with her parents, Lydia is told they are tears of joy for her growth, and she reflects on the smooth family reunion. For the first time, Lydia enjoys a warm family dinner, and her brother Julius promises to get the books she requested. Her mother, father, and brother wave goodbye from the doorway, wishing her a safe journey. Lydia reflects on her brother's help and anticipates Orlando's joy before deciding to buy flowers from a young girl. A little girl in a blue dress offers fresh-picked flowers to a lady in a green gown. Lydia recalls a cruel moment from the novel where an attendant tormented Orlando with the promise of flowers, and in her memory she yells for him to stop. Smiling warmly, Lydia offers to buy all of the little girl's flowers, asking her to make a bouquet. Carrying the beautiful bouquet in a suitcase, Lydia walks on, wondering if Orlando will like the flowers. Upon reaching the tower, Lydia finds the entrance unguarded and wonders where the guards are. A feeling of unease washes over her as she hurries inside, hoping that she is just overthinking the guards' absence. Rushing in, Lydia finds the attendants knocked out on the floor as Orlando vows to protect the last dish she made. Lydia grips the bouquet tightly, and sternly asks what is going on. Orlando looks up with relief at her return, but immediately bows his head in shame. One of the attendants explains with a smirk that the monster prince has been protecting the food she made for him. Realizing these new guards are even worse than the last, Lydia seethes with anger as one of them smugly points out how much the prince cares for her. The attendant reveals they tested Orlando's willpower by forcing him to kneel all night to prevent the dishes from falling, leaving Lydia horrified by their cruelty. Seeing the horrific scene, Lydia drops her suitcase and the bouquet of flowers she brought for Orlando. Spotting a knife on the floor, she bends down and picks it up, her expression hidden but her intent clear. With a furious glare, Lydia lunges forward, vowing that the attendants will face the consequences for their actions. As Lydia leaps at the first attendant with the knife, her hand glows with a strange blue light. She expertly disarms the first attendant, pressing the blade against his throat. The second attendant quickly draws his own ornate sword to defend his partner. Seeing the escalating violence, a terrified Orlando cries out for Lydia to be careful. The first attendant scoffs at Lydia, questioning if a woman can defeat him and offering to spare her for her father's sake if she drops the knife. He continues to smirk, confident in his superiority. The second attendant chimes in, warning Lydia that if she refuses, they will be forced to strike her down without consequence. While Lydia remains defiant, a worried Orlando watches the tense standoff unfold. Drawing his sword, the first attendant arrogantly orders Lydia to her knees to apologize, warning her that his patience is thin. In a shocking move, Lydia throws herself onto the attendant's sword, impaling herself as he looks on in disbelief. Blood splatters across the attendant's horrified face, while Orlando screams Lydia's name in terror, panicked by what just happened. The first attendant shouts in alarm as his partner collapses behind him. The knife Lydia was holding clatters to the floor, stained with blood. Gripping the sword embedded in her chest, Lydia glares at them, declaring that they will now face the consequences she promised. The second attendant watches in horror, clutching his own weapon, stunned by her actions. Trapped behind a gate, Orlando can only watch helplessly as the tragedy unfolds. With a flick of her wrist, Lydia throws the small knife, which embeds itself in the second attendant's throat. The second attendant slumps against the door, gagged and dying from his wound. Weakened and bleeding from her mouth, Lydia begins to lose consciousness. As she collapses, Orlando begs her not to die, and she weakly whispers that the blade missed her heart. Lydia lies unconscious on the floor, her red hair spread around her, as Orlando cries out her name in agony. Trapped and desperate, Orlando shakes the bars of his enclosure, screaming for someone to come and save Lydia. Believing no one is coming, he sinks to the floor in despair, blaming himself for what happened. Tears of anguish and helplessness stream down Orlando's face. Resolved to get help, Orlando decides he must jump from the window just as Lydia once did, believing it's the only way to be noticed. Before he can act, he turns in surprise, sensing that someone has arrived. Crown Prince Austin appears in the doorway, horrified to find his new guards and Lydia seemingly dead on the floor. Orlando looks up at his brother with tear-filled eyes, pleading for help. Rushing to Lydia's side, Austin checks her pulse and is relieved to find her heart is still beating, though weakly. Austin gently lifts Lydia into his arms, urging her to wake up as he carries her away, while Orlando feels a glimmer of hope, thankful for his brother's kindness. From behind the bars, Orlando watches them go, a look of profound sadness on his face. Lydia awakens in a dreamlike, verdant landscape and sees an adult Orlando with Colette and Austin, who beckons her to hurry and join them. Smiling, the dream Lydia realizes with a start that she is seeing a grown-up Prince Orlando. As the adult Orlando bids a happy farewell to Colette, a glowing spear hurtles toward him, and Dream, Lydia screams a warning for him to dodge. The adult Orlando turns, his expression calm, seemingly unaware of the imminent danger. The magical spear strikes him, piercing through his body in a flash of light. Dream Lydia cries out in absolute horror as she watches the man she's sworn to protect die before her eyes. Lydia screams as she wakes with a jolt, finding herself safe in a luxurious bed. Clutching her head, she realizes it was all a dream and sees Crown Prince Austen in her room, concluding that he must have saved her after she killed the guards. Looking up at the Crown Prince, Lydia formally thanks him for saving her life. Austen takes her wrist gently but firmly, telling her that she will not be returning to the tower. Lydia's eyes widen in horror as Austen explains that Prince Orlando has been summoned by the Emperor concerning the deaths of the guards. Grabbing Austen's arm in a panic, she desperately asks how long Orlando has been gone and if he is going to be punished. Austen is taken aback by her forwardness, wondering why a mere maid is so deeply worried about his younger brother. He calmly reassures Lydia that no punishment has been decided, as her interrogation is required before any conclusion can be reached. Lydia immediately asks to be taken to the Emperor, consumed with worry for Orlando, while Austen questions if she has an excuse for killing 2 of the Emperor's son's guards. Turning back with a look of grim determination, Lydia states she knew the consequences of her actions and will accept any punishment, so long as Prince Orlando is not involved. Austen reflects on Lydia's unwavering loyalty to Orlando, contrasting it with his own life surrounded by people hiding behind smiling, false masks. He remembers his childhood innocence, believing in their loyalty, only to realize as he grew older that it was merely self-interest and fear. But Lydia was different. He recalls her fierce defiance and wonders if anyone else would have done the same in her place. As a red-haired woman in a pink dress curiously wonders what Orlando did to earn such loyalty, Austen announces Lydia Dalton's arrival. The Emperor agrees to see her, as a distraught Orlando cries out Lydia's name while being held back by 2 men, Count Rond and Baron Capus. Rushing to Orlando's side, Lydia gently asks about his wound, but he insists that he is fine and tells her not to worry. The Emperor watches their tender interaction with a scowl, thinking to himself what an eyesore it is. Crying, Orlando protests being separated from Lydia, but she calmly asks him to wait quietly for her. After a moment's hesitation, Orlando relents and allows a guard to lead him away. Austen observes Orlando's dependence on Lydia, pondering if the feeling of being needed is a good one that he should try for himself. In the throne room, the Emperor commands Lydia Dalton to explain what happened as Orlando stands before him, watched by Austen and the 2 nobles. Lydia reports the guard's disrespect, claiming it was an insult to the imperial family, prompting Austen to suggest she be rewarded if her account is true. The Emperor silently considers her words, his expression unreadable. Count Rond and Baron Capus tremble with fear as they await the Emperor's judgment. The Emperor asks Orlando if the story is true, and the boy confirms it, adding that they withheld his food, which makes the Emperor grin coldly. A terrified Orlando finds himself caught between the grim expressions of Austen and Lydia. The Emperor cruelly berates Orlando for his weakness, wishing he had been disposed of long ago, causing the boy to look up in shock and whisper, "Father." With a sharp sound, the Emperor raises his hand to violently strike his son. Orlando cowers on the floor as his father forbids him from calling him that, and Lydia seethes with rage at the cruelty. She inwardly fumes that the Emperor is blaming his innocent son, while the Crown Prince simply stands by with a smirk. Seeing an opportunity, Count Rond observes that His Majesty clearly doesn't care about the second prince. Count Rond flatters the Crown Prince, while Baron Capus maliciously questions if Orlando even shares the Emperor's bloodline, horrifying Lydia. Realizing she must intervene before the Emperor cast Orlando aside for good, Lydia's eyes narrow with determination. Lydia boldly steps forward to address the Emperor directly. She declares Orlando's succession is legitimate, claiming she had a prophetic dream that he is the key to unifying the continent, piquing the Emperor's interest. Lydia confidently confirms that she saw a prophetic dream just last night. She invents a tale of Orlando's future greatness, but Austen scoffs internally, thinking his father won't fall for such an obvious lie. The Emperor challenges her, demanding to know how she can prove her story. Looking him dead in the eye, Lydia offers to tell him everything so he can judge for himself. Waving his hand, the Emperor dismisses his court, preparing to speak with Lydia alone. As a guard takes his arm, a worried Orlando looks back at Lydia. Lydia offers Orlando a warm, reassuring smile, telling him that she will be all right. Orlando watches her go with teary eyes, while Austen concedes that her devotion is admirable. The heavy doors close behind Lydia as she follows the Emperor into a private chamber. Now alone, the Emperor presses Lydia to reveal the contents of her prophetic dream. Lydia reveals two pieces of information: that Orlando is descended from a legendary thunder dragon, and that his mother's name was Lady Emily, shocking the Emperor. The Emperor is stunned, recalling Emily was a secret name known only to him, and begins to believe her prophecy might be real, demanding to know what else she saw. Lydia cautiously claims that was all, worried she might overstep, as the Emperor shocks her by declaring he believes her. Overwhelmed with relief, Lydia can hardly believe her gamble paid off. The Emperor turns and calls for his attendant to enter. He orders the punishment to be announced as Austen listens from the doorway. Glenrond and Edmund Capus are to be executed, while Lydia Dalton goes unpunished. The Emperor continues, stripping the two nobles of their titles and lands for questioning the imperial bloodline. As the two men are dragged away screaming for mercy, Austen is stunned by his father's complete reversal. Lydia, however, realizes that it wasn't her prophetic dream that truly swayed the Emperor. She recalls from the novel that the two nobles were originally punished for theft, realizing the Emperor was only feigning favor and looking for a pretext. Surrounded by images of treasure, Lydia understands the Emperor had wanted their lands all along and simply used this incident as an excuse. Unaware of the political maneuvering, Orlando innocently asks his father if he and Lydia can leave now. The Emperor agrees, and Lydia realizes with a chill that the entire incident, including the assault, may have been orchestrated by him. Orlando beams and thanks his father, confirming Lydia's suspicion that the Emperor provoked the nobles into slandering his son. Overjoyed, Orlando runs to Lydia, while the narration concludes that he was nothing more than bait in his father's scheme. Lydia grasps that once Orlando has served his purpose as bait, the Emperor will discard him without a second thought. With a heavy heart but a determined gaze, Lydia accepts the path she must now walk. Orlando cheerfully asks Lydia to go home together, but she looks down at him with an expression of profound sadness. Politely excusing herself, Lydia internally vows to awaken Orlando's dragon power so this kind of tragedy will never happen again. Promising herself she won't endure that humiliation again, Lydia reassures a worried Orlando that she is fine and will recover quickly. Orlando tearfully apologizes for what happened, but Lydia smiles and encourages him to become the strongest, causing the young prince to blush. Pat, pat. Lydia gently teases him about his blushing, and he quickly claims it's just the heat from the sun. Lydia smiles warmly, promising Orlando that she will be by his side for all the challenges that lie ahead. Orlando calls out to her, confused, but she tells him to drop the formal greetings just as a new figure appears. As Crown Prince Austen approaches, Lydia offers him a formal greeting. Austen returns her greeting with a knowing smirk. Austen praises Lydia for her impressive rescue of Orlando and offers her a position as his own lady-in-waiting. The unexpected offer leaves both Lydia and Orlando completely stunned. While Lydia politely declines, stating she was only doing her duty, Orlando blurts out that Austen can take her, leaving everyone surprised. Austen looks on with intrigue, wondering why Orlando would so easily let go of his one and only ally. Lydia points out to a conflicted Orlando that he himself seems to be agreeing with the prince's offer. Turning away, Orlando sadly explains that if she stays with him, she will only suffer more. Orlando looks up with forced determination, while Lydia quietly asks if that is truly what he wants. A tense silence hangs between them as Orlando holds his ground, refusing to change his mind. Suddenly, Orlando turns and runs, insisting he can get home on his own as Lydia calls out his name in alarm. Austen physically stops Lydia from following, reminding her that her injury would prevent her from properly serving Orlando anyway. Realizing he is right, Lydia resolves to use her forced recovery time to pursue other matters. Composing herself, Lydia formally apologizes to the Crown Prince for her earlier rude behavior. Austen graciously accepts her apology, telling her to see a doctor, and that she can serve as a maid once she has recovered. Lydia thanks the Crown Prince, but makes one final request, that he appoint a maid named Wendy to serve Orlando. She looks at him with unwavering resolve, her request clear and direct. Austen silently considers her proposal. After Austin departs, promising to pass the message along, Orlando sits alone in his room, anxiously wondering if Lydia is recovering well. A blonde maid named Wendy arrives with a covered dish, presenting Orlando with his meal. Orlando looks down at the floor, quietly telling Wendy that he will be counting on her. Wendy smiles brightly, introducing herself as Lydia's best friend and promising to serve him with all her heart. In a flashback, Lydia's narration reveals that she has been observing people for a potential ally, and that Wendy is not one of them, but a valued client. Lydia clarifies that Wendy is a business partner whose friendliness is motivated by money, which makes her predictable enough to be entrusted with another favor. A cute animated scene shows Lydia giving Wendy a bag of coins, to which Wendy eagerly agrees. Back in the present, Wendy serves Orlando his meal, and he quietly thanks her. Orlando slowly lifts a piece of food to his mouth with a fork. His eyes widen in amazement, sparkling with delight as he discovers the food tastes incredible. When Orlando asks who prepared the meal, Wendy proudly reveals she made it herself, using a recipe Lydia had taught her. A bold orange and black recruitment notice is displayed, seeking new staff members for creative roles like translators and editors. A promotional collage featuring characters from numerous different series encourages readers to visit the Scanlation Group's website. As Orlando sleeps, Wendy thinks back to Lydia's secret instructions to keep mentioning her name to combat his loneliness and encourage him to ask for things. A sly smile crosses Wendy's face as she contemplates her mission. Seeing Orlando looking out the window, Wendy asks if that's Lydia over there, causing him to ask where. Orlando's gaze follows to the garden, where he sees Lydia walking alongside Crown Prince Austin. Tears well up in Orlando's eyes, his expression filled with heartbreaking sorrow as he watches them. Wendy asks if he wants Lydia to return, offering to relay the message, but Orlando quietly insists that it's fine. Wendy smirks at his attempt to act tough, thinking she'll have to try harder to earn the bonus Lydia promised as the days go by. Wendy presents Orlando with a bouquet of cheerful yellow flowers, announcing that they are a gift from Lydia. Bombarded with constant reminders of Lydia from a book she brought to a handmade gift, Orlando begins to tremble, overwhelmed. With tears streaming down his face, Orlando finally breaks, begging Wendy to please be quiet for a bit. Wendy asks what's wrong as Orlando cries, admitting he regrets everything and wants Lydia to come back. Wendy smiles, promising to tell Lydia, but adds that she can't return immediately and asks if Orlando has any ideas. Wendy leans in and whispers a plan into Orlando's ear. Her idea is to summon the Crown Prince, but Orlando worries about making his brother angry. Wendy retorts that he must choose between his fear and getting Lydia back. Orlando's eyes narrow with resolve. Picturing Lydia serving someone else, Orlando decides he won't give up, declaring he doesn't care if his brother gets angry. With newfound determination, Orlando grips the bars of the gate, staring intently. When Wendy asks if he's tired, Orlando insists he's fine, shouting that he wants to see Lydia. A blush of excitement spreads across Orlando's face as he hears that the Crown Prince has finally arrived. The doors swing open to reveal Lydia and Austin. Orlando calls her name joyfully as she offers a formal greeting. With cat ears popping out in his excitement, Orlando shyly asks Lydia about her wound and whether she's mad at him. Lydia reassures him she's fine, much to his relief, but Austin interrupts their reunion with a pointed cough, reminding Orlando of his presence. After a flustered greeting to his brother, Orlando realizes he'd completely forgotten him, as an unamused Austin asks if he was summoned just to watch them chat. Orlando stammers, trying to explain the real reason he called for the Crown Prince. He looks from Lydia to Austin and boldly declares he wants Lydia to return to his side, shocking Austin, who reminds him he just let her go. Austin's expression darkens as he glares down at his younger brother, accusingly asking if he is being mocked. Tears fill Orlando's eyes as he looks up at his furious brother, utterly terrified. Lydia realizes Austin is enraged, seeing this as a great trial for Orlando and recalling a similar event from the original story. She remembers the novel described a time Orlando visited a cruel, blindfolded relative who called him weak and useless for his constant crying. The narration concludes that the relative had Orlando locked in a tower, leaving the young prince confused and alone.